Hey everyone, welcome to Recipe for Reality Small Bites. This is the second video you're getting today, and it's because we haven't been able to record the main show in a few weeks, so we wanted to make it up for you, give you two Small Bites episodes. This week, I just did one where I simulated a Big Brother season of all Survivor players. I basically gave my top 16 Big Brother players that I would love to see from Survivor to make the transition like Sari did, so go check out that video if you haven't. And now this video, which is based on this episode, this most recent episode, which is one of the most iconic exits we've ever seen on Big Brother with Anika. And I did have to make this video as soon as it happened, and that is the top 10 most memorable exits from Survivor. And now it's very tough because a lot of memorable exits are memorable for different reasons. It's like, is it because of the reaction of the blind side? Is it the things said after? Is it Jeff's commentary? Is it because it's awkward? Is it because it's fun? Is it because it's sweet, endearing? There's so many different elements to what makes an iconic exit from Survivor. So it was very hard to narrow it down, and I obviously did have some honorable mentions. There are three iconic exits that, like, I don't love, but I can at least admit are iconic. Like, Danny leaving in 44 and doing the Robert De Niro impression is, like, severely awkward to watch and very uncomfortable, but it is iconic. It's, like, a very memorable exit, especially because of Jeff's reaction. And same thing with, like, Dawson's kiss of Jeff when she just, like, grabs him and kisses him. Like, I don't even know how I could even put this in a top 10 because it's not, like, a great exit. It's very uncomfortable to watch, but, like, I will never forget it. So I had to bring it up in honorable mentions. And then Greg from Borneo, it's like the iconic one where he's like, he like whines like a little kid, and it's funny, but every time I rewatch it, I'm like a little bit more and more sick of it as I rewatch. So these honorable mentions are not really in any sort of order. It's just kind of how I thought of them. Something very recent, Kelly's blindside in 45, the what the hell guys, obviously met with Jake's whoa, which I think is an iconic, soundbite. Just that whole moment is great, and just the stunning look, or stunning for two reasons, because Kelly is stunning, but also just the look of being stunned of Kelly exiting is really tough to watch. And I'm not going to show any videos here because also I'm editing this at an airport as we speak, so I'm not able to show you the videos, but please go look all of these up because they are iconic exits, and I think they'll refresh a lot of your memories. Speaking of memories, do you remember Chicken's Damn, when Chicken went home? This was the first exit I ever watched of Survivor. This is the first episode I ever watched of Survivor, and it was an iconic exit. Chicken's Damn. Everything after that is not as iconic to me. It's the damn part that makes it iconic, but nonetheless, it is iconic. Also, Jay, this is another one where, like, the reaction to getting voted out is not bad, but it is when he goes up and tells Jeffrey, snuff my torch, Jeffrey. Like, that's the memorable part of that exit, but because the whole exit isn't as memorable, I didn't put it in my top 10. Another iconic one is Richard Hatch from All Stars. His I've been bamboozled, and then he starts like hula dancing out. I think a lot of people have soured on Richard Hatch, obviously for very, very valid and warranted reasons. But I do think it's still an iconic exit, especially being the first winner of the show to kind of have that moment, like the first time Richard Hatch has ever been voted out of Survivor. It's a big moment, not just because of the bamboozled and the dancing, but the bamboozled and the dancing obviously adds a lot to it. And kind of along that note, obviously Sandra going out in Game Changers, the way she kind of goes out to all the applause. Again, that's a sentimental one, so I didn't put it in the top 10 because I feel like top 10 is more reserved for the kind of very big, kind of sassy or stunned reactions or memorable moments, whereas Sandra's, it's just an applause for her because this is the first time she's been voted out in 3 seasons, and that's huge. But ultimately it didn't make it on. Same as like Sari, when they applaud her after going out in Game Changers, even though I'd rather not talk about that because it's a sore subject. Speaking of Game Changers, Tony's exit is great. Didn't make the list, but just him kind of exchanging words back and forth between Sandra, especially seeing how their story would kind of come full circle in Winners at War. It's really fun to see like these two, the king and queen of Survivor, the only 2-time winners. Obviously Tony at the time was not a 2-time winner, but now in retrospect, the two-time winners kind of going at it is really, really fun. Same as JT's exit, where he curses and Michaela's pouring the drink and Sandra's like, tell Malcolm you say hi, and then Malcolm's boot as well. Game Changers has a lot of great boots. I think because of the Varner situation, all the pre-merge of Game Changers is kind of soured, but it does have some really good exits, obviously from Sandra, from JT, from Malcolm, and then later from Sari and from Tony. So like a lot of iconic exits in Game Changers, but all of them sadly exited the top 10 and merely show up in honorable mentions. You obviously have two very similar ones. Shane, where he's like, I'm gonna eat a hot dog in 10 minutes or 10 seconds or whatever he said. And then Jamie, who gets voted out of Guatemala and says, a blindside, nice! It's like yelling at the jury or yelling at the players who were there and just making one last remark. But again, not enough to put it on top 10. We do have James from Ghost Island. The glare he gives, it's like shooting daggers. It is really, really tough to watch. Savage, his blindside in Cambodia, when he's first of all too stunned and you see like Kelly and Sierra and Abby celebrating, and then Abby says, at least you made jury. And Andrew turns around and just flips her off, which is just such a great moment. Though, I do have one in my top 10 that is very similar, especially with Abby, that I wanted to kind of put ahead of this one. And then one that I don't know if it counts because it's not a vote out. It's when Michelle votes Neil off of the jury. Neil gives that great speech of like, you're merely, suckling at the teat or whatever. All I remember is the suckling at the teat part, but it's just such a great like final, speech to Michelle, which is a little cringy considering Michelle wins and is proven right by getting rid of Neil. But for Neil who got preemptively taken out of the game because of his knee, it's good to get like a final moment for his legacy because he probably won't ever come back again. So it was a kind of a cool final moment for him. And then, as we get into this top 10, there are 3 very similar exits for me that were kind of battling for the top 10 spot. One of them being Rob in Heroes vs. Villains, where, he hugs, I believe it's Sandra or Jerry, and then he goes to hug Coach, and then he says, no, you're a little man, and Coach has to sit down. I love that. And then again in South Pacific when Rick basically does the same thing, he's like, no, you sit down. And then it happens as well with Stacey in South Pacific, who is my number 10, because of these 3 iterations, I think the Stacey one is my favorite. Every time Coach is rejected by the players that vote him out, it is really, or that he voted out, it is really entertaining to see. Rob's you're a little man, Rick saying sit down, and then Stacey obviously being like, no, I'm not hugging you, goodbye, you sit yourself down. But I think Stacey has the most feist to her, so that's why I'm putting Stacey in the 10 spot. But really, anytime Coach is dissed on the way out of Tribal Council, that kind of is the 10 pick here. But at number 9, one that is a little uncomfortable, but also has a really great zinger from Jeff, and that is Candice's exit in Cook Islands. Obviously, the makeout with Adam. It's awkward because Adam and Candice, you don't brush your teeth out there, or if you do, you don't brush it properly enough to where I can't imagine the kiss was good. Maybe because of the passion and the, pheromones or whatever. I don't know. The kiss is awkward. You have this great reaction shot from Nate in the jury where he just kind of like makes a face and he's like, ugh! And then she finally goes to Jeff, and Jeff says like, a kiss is nice, but if he really loved you, he would have given you the immunity necklace, which I think is just a great Jeff zinger. So I had to put this in my top 10. It is just such an iconic exit, from the uncomfortability of the kiss, the great jury reactions, and then obviously Jeff's zinger. Honestly, talking about it more, it might belong higher on the list, but I'm going to keep it here at number 9. At number 8, it's a very, very, very betrayed Natalia from David vs. Goliath. Now, the reason it's so low is because there's another David vs. Goliath exit that's even higher on this list. But Natalia, don't talk to me, with like Alec trying to like smooth things over, and she looks at Kara, she's like, did you know? And Kara's like, no, I didn't know. It's just such a great exchange because Natalia just comes with such a fire just right away, just like can't even process it. She's just so pissed off and just runs to Jeff basically. He's like, I don't even know what just happened. And she's like, oh, I can't look at you. I can't look at you. It's just such a great like pissed off reaction that I wish more people in Survivor had, because listen, it is your dream, and for a majority of people who play Survivor, it'll never be replicated. You don't get that invitation back unless you are a legend of the game. So I think it's really fun to see Natalia be spiteful because, hey, listen, you get one shot. Most people make it count. Have an exit. Go out with a blaze of glory. Why not? Which brings us to our number 7 pick, which is in a very similar vein, which is the inspiration behind this video, which is Anika from this most recent season. Now, Anika, the reason I like it slightly more than Natalia's is that Natalia just word vomits everything. She just can't believe it. She's like, don't look at me. She says it all. Anika is silent, and I think that is even more telling of the betrayal, because Anika literally is stunned. She can't process it because she also is upset at her teammates, of course, but also upset at herself because she's like, I just did not see it coming. You can kind of see her processing all these different emotions at once, and ultimately then when she is like, who owned this? And you see Sam raise his hand, then you have Andy kind of interjecting and be like, no, we all did it. I think that's a great editing tactic too, especially not knowing where the season's going from here. If Andy ends up winning, it's to show that Andy had a nicer kind of like demeanor about this, while also being a little shady in the voting booth. But if Sam goes on to win this season, then it shows that Sam owned his moves. And if neither of them win this season, then it'll prove that it was the wrong move to get rid of Anika over Andy. So I just love the different multi-dimensional, emotions going on with all the different players. Sam owning the move, Sierra obviously having to make that tough decision between alliances, Rachel being surprised, Andy kind of smiling on his way out of tribal council, but also, kind of surviving by the skin of his teeth, and then Anika being so surprised and shocked and, obviously heartbroken that she starts crying on the way out. It is just one of those iconic exits that as soon as it happened, I was like, you know what, I'm making this video. It's an iconic exit for a reason. Number 6 is actually the last new era exit on the list, just because the other 5 have been kind of sitting with me more, but it is, I think, the best final moment in the new era after a vote out, and that is Cody from Survivor 43. Obviously, when Jesse pulls that huge blindside on Cody, and you think Cody, who has been so positive and so nice and so smiley and so endearing this whole season, is just going to come around and say, F you, Jesse. Instead, he shakes his hand, and that handshake, it makes me emotional. It makes me cry because it is so fueled with weeks and weeks of baggage and gameplay and history. These people have only known each other for less than 20 days, but they still feel like, they are brothers in this moment. And you see how there's a reconciliation there, which is very rare for a blindside like this, especially when Cody was so close to winning with Jesse as his right-hand man holding his idol. And I just think it's an amazing moment. It really does kind of make 43 as good as it is. Because without that blindside, the season just isn't as good as it is because of how it ends with Gabler. I feel like this blindside makes the season still worth being heralded as one of the best of the new era. So I had to put this on the list. It's just the most iconic for me of the new era exits because of just how ingrained with the character and the storylines it is, with everything building to that point. But kicking off our top 5, it's the last sentimental exit. The top 4 are all very spiteful or very shocking, very blindsided. Jonathan Penner is my number 5, and the reason I love this one is because it's both sassy and spiteful, because you have that moment with Abby Maria, kind of like the Savage moment where Abby Maria is trying to hug him. She's like, can I get a hug? And he's like, no, I don't think I'm gonna hug anyone else, in his Penner voice. He's like, I'm not gonna hug anyone else, I'm good. And then once he gets his torch snuffs, this is where it becomes emotional because everyone claps for him. Obviously, he's a legend of the game. He never got his torch snuffed in Micronesia, so he had to wait a whole 2 seasons since playing last to actually have this moment. And then at the end, as he's walking away, he starts whistling the Survivor theme song, the do 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 do, and he's whistling it, and it's just so beautiful. And you have Jeff's final moment there too. I just think it's a beautiful exit because it is everything you love in a great exit combined into one. It is the sassiness of being sassy to Abby Maria, while also being funny because it's Jonathan, with also the whistling and then also the applause, the recognition of a great Survivor player. So, but my top 4 have always been my top 4. You can just kind of change up the order. But number 4, I'm going to put Judd from Guatemala. This one isn't as iconic to the common Survivor viewer because Guatemala is a little bit forgotten, but his last zinger is one of my favorites where he says, I hope y'all get bit by a bunch of crocodiles, scumbags. Just the way he says scumbags and the way he says, I hope you get bit by a bunch of crocodiles. It is just such a great final line because it's Judd, Judd, who has been just the antagonist this whole season to kind of get his comeuppance, but then still be so pouty and almost kind of go out in a babyish fashion. But it's why we love Judd. We love Judd because of these big character moments. So I love Judd's exit. It is iconic to me, and it'll always be one of my favorites that I always quote as well. When I say scumbags, I love saying that word in his kind of Bostonian accent, scumbags. So I had to put Judd there at number 4. At number 3, just such a multi-layered boot reaction, which is Scot from Co Wrong. Now, obviously, this is the moment where Scot thinks Ty is going to play the super idol on him, but Ty decides not to. So not only is it an exit and a reaction to a blindside, but it's a blindside on top of a blindside because the person being blindsided knows he's going, but then is blindsided by the fact that he's not being saved by his ally. So you have this great moment where he looks at Ty and he's like, are you gonna use it? And Ty just shakes his head no. And it is such an iconic moment. And it just shows how Ty does have game. He does have strategy. And yes, it was partially, kind of coerced by his teammates, but it does show how Ty not only had a strategic bone in his body, but also was able to kind of stand up to the bullies, because he does get kind of bullied and manipulated by Scot and Jason this season. He gets bullied by Brad Culpepper on the next season. He's very easily taken advantage of. And I love that this moment is a moment for Ty to stand up for himself. And it's a great moment for Scot and Jason to be like, you got one, you got one on us. And I love how Scott's not like impressed by the move. He's just kind of pissed off about it. It just is great because Scot is a great villain on that season. I wish him the best. I know he's been going through a lot with like heart surgeries recently, so I wish him well, but on the season, he's a great person to root against, and I think this moment is just the cherry on top. And I think if you weren't sold by Ty, the survivor, personality, which I don't know how you can't be, but I think this definitely sold Ty as the survivor strategist that he had after all. My top two, though, should be no surprise. At number 2, really tough between this and my number 1, but I ultimately went with Natalie, can I have your jacket? Natalie Cole's exit from David vs. Goliath is so iconic, so quoted. Just Angelina just kind of standing there like a cold child in the middle of a snowstorm on the side of a road, just asking for this jacket when, like, they're in Fiji. Like, and I get it. It rains. It gets cold. I totally acknowledge that. It's nighttime, but it is Fiji. The sun is eventually going to come out. And I just think it's so funny that, like, she keeps begging and begging for Natalie's jacket. It's just such an iconic moment because you do feel for Angelina because she is cold and wants the jacket, but you're also like, Angelina, just let her go. Like, it's like this woman just got voted out of Survivor. And it's what makes Angelina such a great character. It's what makes Natalie such a great character because she's like, totally ignoring her. She does like a hair flip, I believe, on the way out as well. And she doesn't have words for Angelina, which, I think in some, situations, depending on the player, they would kind of either give the jacket and it would be a sentimental, sweet moment, or they would turn around and say something. But I think the fact that Natalie's silent makes this moment. It really makes this moment as good as it is. But my number 1 should be no surprise, and if you've watched any compilation, it's gonna be in there. If you remember any exit, it's gonna be this one. It is the iconic Millennials vs. Gen X Michaela blindside. Now, Michaela, the interesting thing about this is that I have to kind of back it up slightly before the actual vote out, where the votes are being read, because once Michaela gets that first vote, she flips around. What? And she has vote after vote come in for her, and with every vote, she gets more and more agitated and looks at Jay, and she said, "Did you do it?" And Jay says, "I did it," and he has this smug look on his face, and Jeff stops reading the votes just to kind of take it in, and then, once she's voted out, it's the combination of Anika, Natalia, Natalie, Judd, and Jonathan all kind of rolled into one, because she has like kind of the silent moment for a sec, like Anika, but she's also doing the stare down. And then she also kind of snaps like Natalia does, but then she also kind of has this like, unreconcilable like demeanor to her where like no one can even really approach it. But then you also have Jay's smug look. Like, it is the perfect blindside, not because Michaela deserved to go or people wanted to see her go, but because no one thought it was possible, because she is the strongest woman of the season. She's running the strategy of the season. She is in the majority alliance, but Jay flips it, and Jay was never really in a great position because he was stuck with like Taylor and Figgy. Figgy had just gone home. Like, Jay was not in power, and Jay kind of gets power for this, but at the same time, it puts him on the bottom anyway. So it's just this great, like, strategic clusterfuck. Sorry to curse. But it is kind of that strategic cluster F on top of being just such an amazing character moment for Michaela, on top of being genuinely surprising because her edit was so good for the viewer, and just being an iconic moment because it is a pre-juror moment. And usually these moments happen at the end of the game when these big betrayals happen. At Final 5, Final 6, look at Cody, look at Candice, look at Jonathan. These are all like Final 7, 6, 5 boots. But this is right before the merge, so it makes it even more delicious because it's this big moment, this big, brash, loud moment. Now that I'm looking, there are a lot of pre-merge moments on here because I think pre-jurors especially just have such a tough time with the idea that not only is their Survivor journey over, but they don't even get to be on the jury. They have to just sit and wait until the season's over to even fly home. Yeah, like, they still get to go to Ponderosa, their own Ponderosa, and they get to go on like a pre-jury trip, I believe, or I don't know if they still do it. And obviously they get to, spend time with other Survivor players. But like, for Natalie Cole, for Natalia, for Anika, and especially for here Michaela. Like, she was so close to making at least the jury, and now she doesn't even get that. And I just think it's so telling, because on the next season, she obviously goes home in an unconventional way, but she's a good sport about it, because she's going to be on the jury. She made it far. You know, it was a kind of wonky vote with the steal a vote. She knew that Sari and her had gotten busted for trying to steal Sarah's vote, whatever. But here, it's just complete, utter blindside, complete, utter shock, and it is the best reaction for any vote out in the history of Survivor. So there you go. There are my top 10 favorite exits, or most iconic, or most memorable, whatever you want to call it, exits from Big Brother. Thank you for watching. If I missed any, which I'm sure I did, please let me know, you scumbags, in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you for staying tuned for this show. I promise you, Recipe for Reality will be back next week. We're just getting all our bearings. It is tough. October, spooky season, film festival season. It's a busy time. Zach's in rehearsals. Zach's a teacher. I'm an actor. I'm at film festivals. I'm a server. A lot of things happen, but we have small bites. You have 2 small bites, hopefully making up 1 big bite today on your Wednesday as we approach this episode tonight. As for who I think is going to go home tonight, it just goes to show that when you start to see trends in the new era, sometimes those trends are upheld. So that's all I'll say. I think someone from Blue is going to go home in this merge, just because that has kind of been the norm, that whatever tribe goes in with the majority in the merge loses someone at the mergatory. But we're not getting mergatory this year, supposedly. Anyway, those are my quick, brief thoughts on this upcoming episode. Enjoy the episode tonight. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you don't have a bitter exit on the way out. But if you do, please tell me you wish you see me get fed to crocodiles. That would make my day. So thank you so much for watching, and enjoy your day as you whistle your own Survivor theme song on the way out. And the tribe has spoken.